Hey folks, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, July 14th? Wednesday, it's a pandemic. Wednesday, July 14th edition of StudentLoanJustice.org. I'm trying to keep it kind of short here tonight, folks, but I have really got to get a few things off my chest, specifically with a couple of people out in the zeitgeist, sort of B-list celebrities or influencers, whatever you want to call it, Mr. Mike Rowe and Dave Ramsey. Now, I singled them out, but there are many people like them who have made a cottage industry of bashing the borrowers being crushed by student loan debt. And it really pisses me off. These people are the biggest challenge, I'll say, that we have to face. So let's start with Mr. Mike Rowe. So Mike Rowe is the dirty jobs guy, the don't go to college guy, the become a welder or an electrician or a plumber guy, which is all good and well. I don't have any problem with him telling people not to go to college and to do the trades, whatever. That's fine. We can debate that, but that's not why he is a problem. The reason Mike Rowe is a problem is that certainly since the pandemic, all of a sudden Mike Rowe has upped his game. And he's saying, why should my tax dollars be used to pay for you irresponsible snowflakes who choose to get a $300,000 liberal arts degree from Columbia University? I'm not having it. Similarly, well, I'll get to Dave Ramsey in a minute. Let's stick with Mike Rowe. First of all, Mike Rowe is putting all student loan borrowers into this basket of snowflakes, if you will. Here's some facts that Mike Rowe refuses to acknowledge, and I have brought up all these facts to Mike Rowe in exchange in recent months. The majority of student loan borrowers are over 35 years old. There are more people over the age of 35 than under 35 with student loans. We are not snowflakes. We are not kids. Maybe more important, 40% of all student loan borrowers never graduated. They are working in the trades. They are plumbers and electricians, etc. And more than that, it's important to note that a lot of people with student loans, probably 20%, went to either for-profit colleges or voc techs to learn the trades. So while Mike Rowe is wagging his fingers at the borrowers, he's actually wagging his fingers at his own audience. And I'm sorry, that's despicable. He is essentially preying upon long-held misconceptions in the public. When you talk about student loan borrowers, you think, college kids. No. The reality is far different from that. Another thing that Mike Rowe never does is he never even bothers to acknowledge the fact that student loans, unlike all other loans in this country, have been uniquely stripped of constitutional protections like bankruptcy rights, like statutes of limitations, like fair debt collection practices, like truth in lending laws. This is a big government, unconstitutional, predatory student loan scam, the likes of which our country has never seen. Mike Rowe will never acknowledge that. He is addicted to essentially pitting the people against one another. People who don't have college degrees, they hate people with college degrees, and Mike loves that. That's what he is preying upon. He's not trying to solve any problems. He is trying to outrage people and divide the people against each other. And that is disgusting. What's really disgusting is people like Mike Rowe consider themselves to be conservatives. But as a practical matter, what Mike Rowe is succeeding in doing by wagging his finger at the people being destroyed by these loans is he is defending and perpetuating the very same lending system that he apparently doesn't like or that he wags his finger at us about. This makes Roe a very dangerous person. Dangerous. He is actively working against us by putting out these bullshit stereotypes and reinforcing them again and again and again. He is playing his viewers' basest emotions to the hilt like a violin. And Mike Rowe ought to be fucking ashamed of himself. Because remember, there is nothing conservative about this lending system. It is a big government, some would say socialistic, lending scam. It feeds the colleges who Mike Rowe claims to not like. I really have to question out loud what kind of arrangements, what kind of financial arrangements Mike Rowe might have with colleges, with college interests, with lending companies, with lending company interests. Who knows? Maybe even the Department of Education. But as I said, I have gone toe-to-toe with Mike Rowe, and I have pointed out these facts and far more, which completely demolish the argument that he is trying to make. You know, he likes to appeal to the taxpayers. It's like he's defending the taxpayers' money. Well, that's ridiculous. The taxpayer has made the Department of Education and its contractors have been booking profits of over $50 billion a year on this lending scam. And as a matter of fact, going back not years, but decades, the Department of Education has even been making a profit on defaulted student loans. You know, all of these federal loans could be canceled tomorrow without needing one dime of money from the Treasury, without adding one penny to the national debt. So Mike Rowe's insincere appeal to the taxpayers is another disgusting attempt for him to reinforce existing stereotypes that are just false. They are just wrong-headed, and Mike Rowe ought to be ashamed of himself. So I will post a recent post that Mike Rowe did. This is Vintage Rowe. This is what he does. He cherry picks one guy who borrowed $300,000 to go to Columbia Film School, and he puts all borrowers in that basket shamelessly. And I urge you all to make your own comments on this thing. And I don't want people to spend too much time on it. But I will say this: don't be nice to this son of a bitch. Don't beg and plead and say, "Oh, you know, when I went to college, I had this problem, I had that problem." I went on his page and I said, "You're a charlatan and a fraud, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And if you consider yourself to be a conservative, you need to turn your conservative card in, because you are fighting for the worst big government, socialistic, college-feeding lending scam in the history of this country. And oh, by the way, this lending system has catastrophically failed. I don't care what you want your people to think. These loans will be canceled. Even before the pandemic, 80% of all borrowers were never going to be able to repay. We were headed for a default rate of 80%, if not higher. Where the subprime home mortgage default rate, by comparison, was a mere 20%. So let him have it. He's a son of a bitch, and particularly if you're like a tradesperson. You know, we've got a lot of plumbers and welders and even truck drivers in this group, and I know at least one of our members has done that. But don't kiss his ass. We need to kick his ass. I've already confronted on this, as I said, many months ago, and we had what I thought was a meaningful exchange. But he clearly hasn't learned his lesson. He's decided to completely ignore everything that I said. So as far as I'm concerned, all gloves are off. This guy's got some other ulterior motives going on. I don't know what they are, but he is just addicted to turning his viewers against student loan borrowers who, on average, are over 35 years old, and 40% who never graduated, and etc. His own people. I might also add that people in red states are being hurt far, far worse than people in blue states. So inasmuch as Mike Rowe considers himself to be a conservative, he is a liability to the GOP. He is a liability to conservatism generally. That's Mike Rowe. So now let's move on a bit. Let's go to Dave Ramsey, financial guru, right-wing Christian conservative. Some would say even evangelistic financial coach that you hear on the radio and you see on television, etc. Dave Ramsey, his shtick, similar to Rose, is to, when people call into your show with student loans, the first thing he does is launches into a finger-wagging session. He says, why did you borrow money? Why did you borrow? What were you thinking? How could you sign on to the dotted line for that kind of debt? Blah, 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 blaming the borrowers. Make no mention of the fact that borrowers are never made explicitly aware before signing for the loans, these 18, 20-year-old kids, before signing for the loans, they're never made aware explicitly that bankruptcy protections are gone from the loans. In fact, in all the loan counseling you see, it says you can discharge your loans in bankruptcy if you can prove undue hardship. Well, to an 18-year-old kid, that sounds pretty reasonable. To anybody, it sounds pretty reasonable. What they don't say is that, yeah, it's impossible to prove undue hardship. So, absolutely no students are ever made explicitly aware that there are no statutes of limitations for the debt, that there are no truth in lending laws for federal student loans, that fair debt collection practices have been restricted, even that state usury laws do not apply to federal student loans. So this whole thing about you should have known better is just a whole bunch of horse shit in the first place. This is not a bad borrower problem. This is a catastrophically failed, I'm going to say it again, big government, college enriching, socialistic, some would argue with some merit, predatory, unconstitutional, and now catastrophically failed lending system. But again, like Mike Rowe, Dave Ramsey never seems to want to mention that fact. Now again, I've actually written some what I thought were pretty friendly appeals to Dave Ramsey in the form of articles in years past, giving him every benefit of the doubt. But during the pandemic, Dave Ramsey, like Mike Rowe, has started to come out very loudly and proudly against student loan cancellation. Now, I'm not going to regurgitate everything I just said for Mike Rowe, but all the same points apply. Dave Ramsey is wrong as wrong can be. But here's the thing about Dave Ramsey that you need to know. Dave Ramsey is provably making money on this student loan scam. Dave Ramsey has partnered with a company called Splash Financial. They're kind of like SoFi. They're a student loan refinancing company. Now, think about this for a minute, folks. When these loans are canceled, and these loans will be canceled, folks, there is no saving this lending system. But when these loans are canceled, companies like Splash Financial are going to lose a lot of money. And if bankruptcy protections were returned to these loans, Splash Financial would lose a lot of money because Splash Financial student loans are considered to be educational loans and, like all private student loans, are not dischargeable in bankruptcy for all intents and purposes. So with Dave Ramsey, it's even worse than Mike Rowe. This son of a bitch is making money on the side with the bad guys. Dave Ramsey has a corrupted, perverse financial interest in arguing against student loan cancellation, against bankruptcy protections. Dave Ramsey is a snake. He calls himself a Christian. He's no Christian. This guy's a snake. And he ought to be more than ashamed of himself. And I think I said it before, and I say it again. Free t-shirt, free hat. In fact, I will find a way to pay somebody $50 if they can get on the Dave Ramsey radio show and make even half of the points that I just made, and especially pointing out the fact that this son of a bitch is making money on the side. He is preying upon his audience. And, I feel sorry for them. They are vulnerable, they're naive, they're some of them are in great financial distress. And there is Dave fucking Ramsey to to dig the knife a little deeper. And make no mistake, guys, people who refinance their federal student loans today into the private sector, those loans cannot be canceled. So that is kind of looking like it's turning out to be a very bad decision to make. It was a pretty smart thing to do years ago until this pandemic hit and until the obvious fact that this is now a catastrophically lending system was made clear to pretty much everybody at this point. That's not looking so smart right now. And so Dave Ramsey is selling these loans to people that are probably unwise loan instruments to take out, particularly in the current climate where we are absolutely looking at widespread federal student loan cancellation. And really the most important thing is bankruptcy return to all student loans, including the Splash Financial loans. So that's kind of a wash. But so Dave Ramsey has got blood on his hands. And shame on that son of a bitch. And I only wish that somebody could get onto his radio show and ask him how much money he makes selling student loans to his naive, vulnerable, financially distressed audience. So, hey, if I can see your comments, I will gladly respond to them. Looks like there might be a little bit of a lag here. So if I don't see your comments, I apologize. But so those are the two things that I wanted to say. Mike Rowe is a shill. Dave Ramsey is a super shill. And both of them should be ashamed of ourselves. Now, I could spend the next 4 hours talking about other name brand conservatives, like, you name it, Dinesh D'Souza, Kat Timpf, Fox News, just a bunch of people, a bunch of sort of name brand conservatives who bash the borrowers, who argue against student loan cancellation. And in all of those cases, those people are a liability to conservatism, which they claim to be. And Ben Shapiro is another one. And they are a liability these days to the GOP. Because remember, guys, the worst hit states in the country are typically red southern states, like Georgia is number one. Citizens of Georgia owe $82 billion in student loans. The entire state budget of the state of Georgia is only $48 billion. So, and, you know, the reason that this most recent Georgia election was even close in the first place, I don't know about the fraud and all that stuff that people are saying. But the reason that that election was even close in the first place was the 2 million distressed student loan borrowers in Georgia. And Republicans threw that election away because of the student loan issue. So these assholes, like the people I just mentioned, and many more, actually, quite a few more, not people like Tucker Carlson, by the way. He has very wisely stayed out of this one. Same with Steve Bannon, has stayed out of this argument to his great credit and wisdom. But these conservatives, these self-branded conservatives, are the worst thing for their own party. And hey, if you're a Democrat, then maybe just egg them on. I don't know, but if you really want to see Democrats elected. But the truth of the matter is, folks, we are a fiercely nonpartisan group. We don't have any love for the Republicans or the Democrats. The Republicans are probably worse, but guys, we're not going to get into this better of two evil things. They're both bad. Maybe one's a good cop and one's a bad cop, but we don't care. We tell the truth no matter who it hurts. More often than, well, we talk bad more about Republicans than Democrats because they deserve it. But nonetheless, we have no love for either party, and we will take it to anyone and everyone who, like Dave Ramsey, Mike Rowe, and others, seek to perpetuate outdated, completely inaccurate myths in the zeitgeist. So don't forget that. I will paste a couple of things in the comments below this section, and feel free to comment on your own. You know, let these people have it. They are hurting you. Every time they open their mouths, they are hurting you. They're hurting us. They are spreading misinformation, and they are perpetuating old bankers' rhetoric, myths, memes, stereotypes that hurt us all. Shame on them, particularly the conservatives out there. I know we got a lot of conservatives in this group, and you're obviously, no matter what your political bias is, you are very welcome here. Whether you're a bleeding heart liberal or a redneck, red state conservative, we are glad that you're here, no matter where you lie on that spectrum. But I do wish that some more conservatives on this group would stand up to these assholes like Dave Ramsey and Mike Rowe and Dinesh D'Souza and Ben Shapiro and Kat Timpf and many others, and shut these people down. It's not hard to do, folks. Probably the most important thing that I'm gonna post below this is an article I wrote about how conservatives are being tricked into fighting for the worst big government, college enriching, arguably socialistic, I don't say that, lending scam in the country, and now they're losing elections because of it. This is probably the single most important thing that you can shove in the face of any knee-jerk conservatives that go, hey, you should pay your loans. Why should my tax dollar be paying for your loans? And remember also, folks, unlike the trillions of dollars that we're seeing right now with this infrastructure stimulus, unlike the trillions of dollars that we've thrown out to the country in pandemic stimulus, including I think over $1 trillion in PPP loans that don't need to be repaid, unlike all that stuff, these loans can be canceled tomorrow without needing one dime from the Treasury, without adding one penny to the national debt. This lending system has failed. There is no saving it, and there should be no saving it. And if people like Mike Rowe, Kat Timpf, Dave Ramsey, all the other people I mentioned had a fucking clue, and they were honest, and they weren't just pimping their audiences, they would come around to agreeing with us. Remember that. And consider yourself an ambassador. Getting this article that I'm about to paste in the comments below this is so important. If you really want to move the ball in our favor, you will get this article in front of the eyeballs of every conservative that you can possibly think of. Famous, infamous, or anonymous. People you know, friends and family, colleagues, whoever. Get this in front of conservatives. They need the scales to fall off of their eyes. So I'm going to leave it there at that, guys. I've said enough. I'm kind of pissed. Maybe the last thing I'll say is keep pushing the petition. And things are happening fast right now. We're getting a lot of media stuff happening right now and soon to come. Things are going really well right now. We're really kicking out. I hope that you've noticed, and I hope that you appreciate that. And the last thing I will say is I hope that you will make a donation at some point. I'm sorry to have to even ask. We don't require much money at all to survive, thrive, fight, and win this battle. Maybe not thrive. We don't need much. Our monthly expenses are less than $2,000 a month, but we cannot do it on nothing, folks. We cannot. So if you appreciate what we're doing, all that we have done, all that we are poised to do, with the film, with the petition, with how we are changing the national conversation, don't forget, it was our petition that started this whole conversation about canceling student loans by executive order in the first place. Why don't you show some love and throw us a couple bucks? You know, this isn't the easiest job in the world, and we're putting our nuts on the table out here and drawing a big target on my back and Ed's back and other people's. So please help out if you can. You know, it really does help, and we don't need much, as I said. You go to the website, studentloanjustice.org. So with that, Ed will be with you tomorrow. I will be back on Friday. Check back early and often, and get to work, guys. You can't sit there and do nothing. Nothing happens when you do nothing. These are your loans. This is your problem. Help. Don't wait, watch, and worry. That does not work. So just remember that. Good luck. God bless. And Godspeed, everybody.